Hello and welcome to the second episode of Curing Confusion. Today we start our series-long adventure into the Final Fantasy franchise. Now what that means is every few episodes of Curing Confusion we're going to explore an entry in the Final Fantasy series. And what better place to begin than the one that began it all, Final Fantasy 1. You ready? I think you are. Let's go.
A big history lesson.
So today's history lesson isn't exactly little. This is the start to the Final Fantasy series after all. Now, if you're a gamer, there's no doubt you've heard of the Final Fantasy series. It's one of the tentpoles in Japanese RPG genre and one of the reasons I personally got into gaming. Now, the conception of Final Fantasy has been told again and again, so bear with me if you've heard it already. A man named Hironobu Sakaguchi joined a small company named Square back in the early 1980s. What you have to understand is that this was a time in which the Famicom was just introduced to households and was the first console to revitalize the industry since the devastating video game crash of 1983. Times were finally looking up. Video gaming wasn't the shovelware shitshow it had been for the past few years. Anyway, back to Final Fantasy. Sakaguchi began his career making such notable games as Rad Racer, 3D World Runner, and of course, the unforgettable Nakayama Miho no Tokimeki High School. Oh yeah. Classic. Of course, while Square was producing these timeless games, other developers such as Enix and Nintendo were producing second-rate games such as Dragon Queef, Super Dumb Brothers, and Legend of That was lame! Shut up! To Sakaguchi's dismay, the games released by Square were not garnering the sales needed for the company to stay afloat. Things started to look grim. Sakaguchi began looking for a last resort, something to help him save the company he loved so much. He was looking for a Final Fantasy. In December of 1987, Hironobu Sakaguchi would release a game that would save Square from its bankruptcy, and he entitled it Final Fantasy. It was in this introduction that Sakaguchi introduced the elements that would further cement the Final Fantasy series. He would borrow a lot of elements from Dungeons & Dragons, such as choosing classes at the beginning of the game, receiving experience and leveling up, fighting boss battles, playing through an epic storyline, and not to mention that brilliant victory theme. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Well, I think that's enough history lessons for one day. How about we get to some fun stuff, huh?
The plot.
Final Fantasy takes place in an unnamed world which is governed by 4 crystals, or orbs, in the US localization. Each crystal represents one of the 4 elements of the world: earth, wind, fire, and water. Also, what is it with Final Fantasy's crystal fetish? It's kind of weird. Anyway. In the start of the game, 4 warriors appear, each with an unlit crystal representing one of the elements. It is up to these light warriors to restore the power within these crystals. Oh yeah. Well, you may be wondering, how the heck are these light warriors going to do all this? Well, it's actually quite simple. All they have to do is
Gameplay.
So the game is your standard Japanese RPG. Wait, no. This game originated your standard RPG. Assuming you don't exactly know the JRPG genre, let me fill you in. You take control of a group of heroes with their eyes set on saving the world. A good amount of the game takes place walking around through towns, talking to locals, and progressing the story. Or at least what passes for one in these early games. In each town you can purchase new weapons and armor to upgrade your attack and defense respectively, purchase new spells for your mages, and rest at the local inn if you're feeling a little bit weary. However, step outside of the town and you are introduced to the combat of the game. These random encounters occur when you are traversing the overworld or a dungeon and suddenly run into a pack of monsters. Utilizing turn-based combat, another element borrowed from D&D, the heroes use strategy to take down their foes the best way possible. And every once in a while, you face what are called bosses, the biggest baddies of them all. Pretty simple, isn't it? Well, it is only the first one after all. In battles, you have the option of physically attacking the foe, using magic to both hurt the enemy or heal yourselves, using items to help you in battle, and, of course, my personal favorite, running from the battle entirely. The battles are extremely fun, even if they are dated in certain ways. However, they can get quite tedious. It seems like every other step has some other baddie trying to sniff your ass for Cheerios. Oh god, Cheerios. I need some sleep.
Carrying that confusion.
So when you begin the game, you're given the option of choosing between 6 different classes for your characters to start out as well as choosing their names. It's very important that you balance your team out correctly. Having an unbalanced team can really make a playthrough unnecessarily tough. Well, unless you're into that kind of thing. So like I said, you have to name your characters. So naturally, I named my characters after the 4 Ninja Turtles. Oh yeah.
Cowabunga!
The game begins earnestly enough. You have to save the princess. Ha! No problem. I've had plenty of experience with that.
Oh no!
You travel to this castle and take on some schmuck named Garland. Kick his ass, save the princess, get a loot. Wait, what? Okay, so there's something you have to understand about this game is that there's very little directions. Very little. It's extremely easy to spend hours in front of your Nintendo mumbling, where the hell do I go? And pretty soon you're arm deep into a bag of cheesy poofs, your controller is crumb infested, and you're curled up in the corner in the fetal position, and this is getting way too personal. Okay, so I'm not afraid to admit that I may or may not have used a walkthrough for this game. But then again, I really have no shame.
He really doesn't.
Who said that? One thing that makes this game so much different than the future installments is the fact that you can visit virtually any place you want, anytime you want. The game is very non-linear in that approach. However, you will find complications if you don't have a certain item or did not activate a certain event before you go to specific areas. Complications such as not understanding the locals or finding a secret satanic rape circle that spews gibberish about time travel. I may or may not be exaggerating that last one. In future iterations, the games become much more streamlined, for better or worse. However, the charm of the non-linearity in the first game is welcomed. Eventually you get the hang of going to towns, talking to the strange inhabitants, and obtaining the information you need to get the job done. Right when you get comfortable enough, the game throws you an awesome bonus. About halfway through the game, your characters get upgraded. What's upgraded, you ask? Well, your characters apparently hit the gym, slapped their lawyer in the face, and started kicking even more ass. I mean, look at these guys. Holy shit! And apparently the white mage was a dude all along. Huh. Go figure. So, more on point. The goal of the game is to bring power back to these 4 crystals. Earth, fire, water, wind. You know the drill. Upon finding the crystals hidden away in the respective element-themed dungeon, you find an evil fiend guarding it. Okay, so we have Lich, the fiend of earth, Carrie, the fiend of fire, Kraken, the fiend of water, and Tiamat, the fiend of wind. Final Fantasy nerds like myself will notice that a lot of these names carry over into the future Final Fantasy games, so that's pretty neat. After you beat all these bozos, reactivate the crystals, and get all the treasure you can, get even more treasure, become rich, laugh at all your rivals, you are finally ready for the final showdown.
Are we done yet?
So you remember that guy named Garland from the very beginning of the game? Yeah, that one. Well, it turns out the guy is from the past, or the future. Wait a second, let me ask some old friends of ours. Okay, yeah, alright. What?
It's time for a Curing Confusion explanation animation.
Okay, so as I understand it, Garland used to be a noble knight. And of course, he turns evil. Who'd have guessed it? He then goes off and betrays the kingdom, then kidnaps Princess Sarah, and retreats to the appropriately named Temple of Chaos. Then my Ninja Turtles roll in and royally hand him his booty, and he somehow is sent back 2,000 years in time. When this happens, his hatred merges with the 4 elemental forces of the world and thus creates the evil fiends. He then sends the fiends forward in time and they proceed to further empower him with the future world's elemental forces as well. It's confusing, I know. Stay with me. It is eventually revealed that the time-traveling fiends are the ones who originally sent Garland back into the past, thus creating the infamous time loop. The loop sustains itself by having the fiends send Garland back and thus Garland sending the fiends forward. In response to this unusual catastrophe, the elemental forces, which are currently being drained by the fiends in Garland, create these 4 chosen light warriors. And it is now on their shoulders to rid the world of poor riding and defeat Garland once and for all.
Holy shit! What the hell is that?
Go! Take that, Garland. You lose. Na 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 na.
Confusion cured. You've earned 34 XP and a canoe.
And so there, in a very large nutshell, is Final Fantasy I. It's quite a start to a video game saga that's still going on today. The Final Fantasy series is largely the reason why I've fallen in love with video games. And it also kind of led to the naming of this series. Curing? Confusion? Nah? Yeah? And I honestly can't wait to share with you more reasons why I love this wild and crazy franchise. But that, unfortunately, will have to wait for a little down the road, because next time, I think there's dark clouds on the horizon.